What's up, guys? We have another game that we snatched victory from a losing position, a losing endgame. It's 1875 KKA 006. Opens with 1d4, knight of 6, c4. What do we play? Budapest Gambit, e5. He takes. Of course, we go knight g4, trying to get back our pawn. He defends the pawn. We bring our bishop out, creating a threat on the f2 square. He defends the threat with e3. Now we bring our other minor piece out. Once again, going to win our pawn back. He goes here, getting ready to kick our bishop, send it back home. We prevent that plan with a5, controlling that square. Now he just develops a bishop and x-rays the knight. I simply castle because that's not an actual threat on my knight. He castles, and now I have one minor piece left, as well as his pawn. I can go rook e8, adding another attacker. I can win the pawn back immediately. I win it back immediately. He develops his last minor piece. Not sure why he went here instead of here, but okay. I guess if I take, he wants to take with the knight, but I don't take. I play d6 and open up my last minor piece, and it defends my knight again, as well as my loose bishop. He hits the knight, so it has to retreat, but before it does, I want to make more space for my minor pieces. So I trade with a check, so he has to respond. And now I get to put my other knight back in the center with less clutter. He goes b3 with the obvious idea of fianchettoing his bishop. Okay, it's reasonable. I walk right into it with my queen, but it's kind of a funny trap. I need to develop my pieces, right? I need to develop my queen at some point. This looks like the obvious natural response, right? But it walks into knight takes knight with check, picking up the bishop for free. Also, it has the potential to just go to the king side, one of these squares. So I do it, setting this trap, hoping he plays the natural move, but he sees the trap, he defends the square so that I don't have that anymore. And now bishop b2 is coming. It's not immediately going to win anything, but I am lined up. I developed my last minor piece. I didn't really see a reason to put it on f5. I'm not exactly sure what this diagonal does or why it would be there. I thought that if I get it to c6, it would look a lot prettier. So that was my idea. I connect my rooks, and I'm developed. He's not fully developed yet. Okay. He takes the knight. I take back, not with the pawn. Whoa. Jesus. But with the queen. He develops his bishop and attacks my pawn. I counter his bishop with my own, saying if you want to take, I don't mind this structure. He takes, and I don't mind this structure. But this pawn is a little weak, so something like queen f3 hits it, which could be annoying. He doesn't see it. He doesn't immediately do it anyway. And now I play f5. I wonder what I would have done. What was I thinking on this? Push maybe? Okay. So f5, controlling this square, creating a little more space, and I don't have to worry about things like this ever because the pawn defends. I like this move. It also blocks the diagonal for the queen. But now he goes here, and it looks like his bishop is really strong. I have to move my queen, and my bishop looks kind of funny because it can't really do anything. So I move my queen here, offering the trade. He takes it, but now I get a pawn on e4, which is nice and advanced, preventing any expansion from him because of en passant, although he can't do it anyway. And this bishop, yeah, it stares down here, but I don't think it's going to do anything. Why do I always do that? So he goes here. Now I'm not going to let him trade and have triple isolated pawns. That's ridiculous. So I take. He takes. And now this pawn is in kind of in limbo, and you don't want to lose this pawn. So I immediately go d5, creating a pawn chain. He shuts it down. Okay, I have weaknesses. He has a weakness. I have a good pawn. It's a tricky position. It's hard to know what to do here, so I just try to advance this rook, and I'm also trying to bait g3, right? Which looks like, oh, I attack the rook, but then he gives me this square, and that's what I want. I want to get this going. So I kind of am hoping for this. It's also not a bad move. Maybe there are ideas of winning this pawn or doubling the rooks and pushing. Um, so it's kind of like putting it here, but with an extra idea of baiting him. He goes off the file, and I guess he wants to put his rook on e3. I move my king up. Wasn't sure what else to do. I can like attack his pawn, but that encourages him to put his rook behind it and then push. So I just improve my king. He does put his rook here, defending, and so like I didn't really know how to break through. So I just tried to improve my position slowly and hope that he would make an inaccuracy. I played g5. Doesn't really do anything, just advances my pawns. He does play this, but now his rook is here. So this idea, not as good. So I move it back because it's hard for him to do anything either. He would have to eventually push these pawns. He improves his king. I go h5, stand off with the pawns, and we'll see who can improve. He goes f3, breaking open the position. If I ignore it, he can take, and my king's going to be exposed to other rooks. I don't really see the idea. So I capture the pawn because I want to keep this without weaknesses, I guess. Check. I have to take back. He takes my rook. Right. He moves his king up. Now I immediately take the only open file. And still I don't really see what to do for either side. He challenges me. And I thought this would... I didn't see how any side would make progress. But white actually can make progress, and I didn't realize it. So basically this was a pretty dead even, near perfect game up until this point. And then I took the rook, and apparently that's not a good move. Apparently this is a winning endgame for white, but from this I could not see it, because it looked to me like he couldn't make progress, because if he pushed, I was not going to take and give him a passer. If he pushes, I was going to close it down. He can't push past it because I have two pawns here, which defend nicely. He can never get to this pawn with his king. So that means that half of the board is irrelevant. And then I figured that if he moves his king up, I'll move my king up. If he pushes either pawn, I'll push the opposite pawn, just locking it down. But it doesn't actually work like that, because if he pushes the H pawn as opposed to the G pawn, and I lock it down, it actually opens up this F4 square. Whereas if he pushes the G pawn, now his king has no infiltration. But if you do the other way, his king does, which means he can put me in zugzwang because of the triangulation, like here, 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 wherever I go, he eventually gets access. He eventually gets in. And there are also other ideas which I didn't consider of pushing this pawn, so like this pawn first, and then this pawn. Now I have to take, because otherwise he just takes. Now he does get the passer. I also get the passer, but if his king is close and mine is far, he can win that way. So I underestimated what happens after the rook trade. I thought I could hold that. It's definitely not a hold. I assumed this would be here blocking his king, but again, after h4, that gets broken down. So I traded. First big mistake. I move my king up thinking, what's the big deal? He goes here, which doesn't follow any of the plans I just mentioned with h4 or a4. So I move my king up. Now he comes back. And again, I just move my king, saying, how are you going to make progress? Thinking it's a draw. And then instead of pushing a4, which is the correct pawn, so that he can create the passer, he plays b4, but this allows me to do what I thought I was going to do and close the position. And then he can't push anymore. So this happened, and I'm like, oh, okay, still a draw. I have a minute on my clock. This 1900. I'm saying, show me what you got. He pushes the G pawn, not the H pawn, which allows me to close it and create this. So now in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, he can infiltrate, and he can't come here, and he can't push. Oh, it's definitely a draw. Easy draw. There's nothing he can do. Just go back and forth. Wrong again. And it's weird that it seems like white has something to do here, but he moves his king over, and my idea was to just walk my king here, put it on this square, and go back and just go back and forth. That's what I was gonna do, and he would have to take a draw. But in the meantime, as I'm en route, I go here, and then if I want to follow up with my plan, I keep going. But the problem with this move right here is even though it looks like I'm coming around, it gives him this moment to play b5. And if I take his pawn, he can play c6, cutting off my king. And so in order for me to get around, it would take 3 moves, and he could easily bring his king in that time. And so this was, and I completely missed that. And he did play b5, and then I realized, and I'm like, oh my god. Now, I didn't want to take the pawn because I thought I would lose immediately with c6. So I figured I have to move my king. Should have moved it to b7. I remember thinking that if he took, that I could just go to the side and sidestep it. I don't know if that's true. I don't remember exactly. But anyway, he didn't take. He moved his king closer, and now I'm thinking that I'm going to lose the game because I messed up with my king. And so now he's threatening this pawn and this pawn. I take, which forces him to take. I go up with my king because I don't have any other moves. He gives me this check. I have to retreat my king, and now I'm thinking I'm just lost. So I go to the side. My intention is that when he takes this pawn, I'll go here and win this pawn. But instead he goes this way, threatening the central pawn. And so now I don't have that same idea, and even if I do, I have to waste a tempo going to this square um, because his king is still blocking it. So he takes the pawn. I go here saying, now you're in zugzwang. You have to move your king, and there's nowhere you can move your king that defends the c6 pawn. So he moves his king, and I take the pawn. And now white is winning here if he finds one move. And it makes a lot of sense, and that move is king e6. What does that do? Well, I don't have any legal moves other than moving my king to one of these squares. And then he can move his king in and his pawn up. But instead, he goes and chases this pawn. But this doesn't shoulder my king, and it allows me to scoop his pawn and get a passer. So now I'm thinking, wait a second, I could draw this, right? Because we can both promote to a queen, and even if he has an extra pawn, I could perpetual him or something. So he takes, I take. I also thought he was going to take this and push. And when he didn't do that, I said, that's weird because with this pawn, if he messes up, it could be an asset for me. And he did mess up, and it was an asset for me. So I pushed my pawn, he pushes, we race. And I knew he would get a queen first. I would get a queen. But I thought that if I don't mess this up, I could draw it. Check. Now you don't want to step into any alignment issues with your queen. And I also didn't want him to... I didn't want to trade queens. I wanted to try to win. So I moved to a light square, so because my queen's on a dark square. So I went to a light square. He took a pawn. But now I'm thinking it's a 3-result game. I give him some checks. Alright, it could have been a draw, but he changed, so I moved a little closer. And now I see that I can win a pawn with my check. And material's still equal, but he can still mess up. So he moves, and I take the pawn. Still completely a draw. He can immediately go queen b3, and if he trades the queens, he pushes, I move my king. He pushes, I push. He pushes, I push. He pushes, I push. Check, and I cover the queening square. So I calculated that queen b3 and queen trade wins for me. And because he didn't take this pawn, it's only 3 squares away. His is 5 squares away. So now I realize that any queen trade, I win the pawn race. So he has to try to perpetual me now, as opposed to before. So he gives me a check, I move. I know that I'm safe because there are no queen trades. But then he pushes his pawn, and that's the losing mistake of the game. Can you see why? Okay, the reason is because queen trades win me the game. Do I have a queen trade? Queen g2. Forced queen trade. Easy. He ignores me. I trade queens. And again, I win the pawn race. Immediately here. And he resigns. Tricky, tricky, tricky game. Okay, so normal Budapest stuff. Normal Budapest stuff. This is fine. Yeah, I really don't mind any of the moves. I guess just don't trade here. Up until this point, though, I don't really see what I would change and what I've done. I suppose here just go rook b8. He will likely go to one of these squares. Huh. Yeah. It's kind of lame that I like all of my moves and it just leads to a draw. Oh well. I guess I'm gonna have to come up with some new ideas so I can win. Okay, well, we swindled that guy. He didn't understand the concept of the queen trade and who's closer with the endgame pawn. So we're grateful for that. We'll steal his points and we'll just keep climbing to 2000. Goodbye.